Hello all, welcome to Shatter Our Souls with Novari. And I'll be honest, today is going to be one of those videos that most people are going to want to listen to and not necessarily to watch. So, hang on to your hats because today we are going to attempt to get the blue flame for Hateno Village. But the problem is that I'm not allowed to use weapons directly. And the easiest way to get a fire from point A to point B is in the form of a torch. Therefore, we have to go through some magnesis shenanigans today, because if you shenan once, you're gonna shenan again. Anywho, the goal of today being simply to get the blue flame torch, get the camera, and maybe even upgrade the bomb rune would be absolutely fantastic. But that's a lot all at once, and it's a fairly long walk from Death Mountain to Hateno Village with a lovely steel cart to carry the torch from wherever we find one to the blue flame and then to the ancient tech lab. So instead of being Mr. Hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is all of my prior knowledge of the series, this is all of the theories I have to go on, today I want to talk about why and where my love of Zelda actually started. And to do that, we actually have to go back all the way to 2003. See, back in 03-ish, my cousin was selling the video game of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo GameCube, along with a couple other ones. These being games like Star Fox Adventures, Need for Speed Most Wanted, Need for Speed not Pro Street, Carbon, being a few of them, and Mario Kart Double Dash, something that I've put a lot of effort into showcasing on this channel. But the thing is that Ocarina of Time was the one that stuck out as being huge. As far as I remember, that first time walking out into Hyrule Field, seeing the sprawling landscape and realizing that there were little things hidden all over the place, that there was something to look for and watch out for, something to find every time you turned around. It was enchanting. And I won't deny that it was one of my big pushes towards becoming a major gamer as it is. Something that really got me to think about gaming in a different light. So, anywho, I started out my profile originally at my cousin's when I was about 7 years old. And the pair of us would play the game for a couple of hours, maybe beat the first dungeon, maybe get to Dodongo's Cavern before we had to stop. The problem was he didn't have a memory card. So every time we would play and try to speedrun the first couple of areas so we could get to Dodongo's Cavern. This meant that the early portion of Ocarina of Time that many people consider to be a masterpiece, I've played to death. In fact, to the point where if I didn't have to play that section of the game again, it probably would still stick with me. All the little hidden areas, the way you can jump from rock to get money for that shield, the fact that you could theoretically enter the Lost Woods and check out all these different smaller locales outside of the Kokiri Forest really stuck out to me. It showcased that the game was bigger than what you might initially expect. But once I had bought the game, the memory card issue was no longer a problem. So we started playing the game more often, pushing further and further into the game. But because he had played the game's openings so often, he didn't really stick with them for long. So, why I want to bring this up is when I had access to it, I had first struggled to move past the opening sections of the game. Generally speaking, by the time I hit the third dungeon, I was in quote-unquote unexplored territory. Generally speaking, I had to get pretty far pretty fast in order to even make it to that point. But I remember making it to the Jabu Jabu's Belly dungeon, and feeling pretty proud of myself for figuring out that he was hungry and wanted fish, and that overall, the entirety of Zelda Ocarina of Time was opening up, revealing secrets, showcasing what the game was there for and what it was intended to be. And then I beat Baronade. Specifically, I had my older sister help me out, because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and made some really silly mistakes in fighting Baronade. This is where I'm going to admit that I took the easy way out. Around this time, my mother had actually started watching and seeing what I was playing and had an interest in the game as well. And I remember she mentioned that she would help me out however she could, but she didn't really know how. So her solution was to go to her job and print out a 60-page monstrosity of a guidebook, if you will, hiding every hidden secret, every single hidden sculptula, every single item in the game. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. That would help immensely. And we got through the next 3 dungeons using said guide, playing the game and just enjoying quiet time in the evening together. And got to the Shadow Temple and I lost interest for a little while. This was also around the time that I was about 8 years old. And I was a little terrified of the Shadow Temple, I won't lie. But what came about when I was 8 was that I had gained access to a new Zelda. This one being Wind Waker. And I remember playing it on my birthday and being so surprised that Errol has like, oh, you don't even know what day it is, it's your birthday! And I thought, what in the world, how did they know? And so for me, it's always had these little tie-ins, these smaller bits of information that have made the series a bigger draw for me. Something more than just, oh, it's a fun little summertime romp through Hyrule. Get to enjoy a little bit of time away. It had deeper meaning for me, because for me, in part, it was also what I did with my family. I played Zelda Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, later on Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Four Swords Adventures, all with the intent of sharing it with those around me. By the time of Breath of the Wild, I had been now 20 years old and thinking, okay, cool, I know what I'm playing. I love this game. This series is amazing. And Breath of the Wild brought back a lot of those older memories, all these little tie-ins, information that might be missed on some. Ended up making me just giddy that they would think to include a statue of Darunia in the Goron Mountain, or Darbus, or Darmani, or whomever. The point being, every time I saw a tie to a different Zelda character, I just fell even further into the, oh, this is amazing how they put that all together, how they thought all of this through and planned around the different types of players and where they would go. And that's the thing, is that you end up with very different approaches to the same general ideology, the very same game. And so, for me, doing this now, showcasing the entire game as I'm messing around and trying to destroy every other big bad evil guy around all of Hyrule, is not just a thing for me to do because I'm bored or generally just wanting to mess around. It's also something that I do to connect with who I was as a kid. It's something I do to really consider the growth and change in my life since the last time that I played Zelda more religiously, more consistently. And I'll be honest, I am the type of person who loved Zelda so much that I have a tattoo on my shoulder of the Goron's tribal symbol, showcasing my family in a way. That anyone who is trusted can become a sworn brother. I believe that's a huge thing about why I am drawn to Zelda is that even the more mundane aspects, the bits and pieces that might not be all that relevant to some, are incredibly important to who I am as a person. And so, for me, Zelda has always been a part of what I do when I'm bored, when I'm have 10 spare minutes of time. And Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom have gone so far as to give me a much more readily available version of these games. These are games that I am more than happy to play on a regular basis because why not? It's something that it's something that is approachable. You don't need a grand 2-hour long plan. Rather, you need about 15 minutes, a idea of which bandit camp are you going after, what are you doing, what monsters are you going to fight, and you go do it. There doesn't need to be some grander ambition. You don't need to defeat the divine beasts every time. Sometimes it's fun or invested enough in just going on a Korok hunt across Akala. Because again, why not? Spending endless hours playing the game and looking for Skulltulas in Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Pose in Twilight Princess, or trying to find the masks in Majora's Mask, all tied back to me enjoying Zelda for what it was. But it was always more than just the base adventure. It was that feeling of connection. So, why am I beating this over the head? Reality is that I feel like a lot of the times in today's world, we get ourselves too caught up in what's going on around us. We're too stressed, we're too concerned with deadlines, with, adult life as is. And I won't lie that I'm one of the people who is very much stuck in the adult life problems situation. But I want to make a statement around the fact that I do believe that it's good for us all to slow down, take a breath, and really take stock and really enjoy what little we can. And if what brings you joy is Pokemon or Zelda or Witcher 3, go for it. Because life's too short to be worried about what people might think. Life is too short to feel like you're being judged. Do what you gotta do with what you have because you're gonna need it. You can have it. You can enjoy what you need. And that's kind of the point I want to get across today. For me, I, as a adolescent growing up, probably in about 2012, started playing Skyward Sword. I remember a lot of people saying that it was a bad Zelda game, that it wasn't done in a good way or something, that there wasn't enough depth to their puzzles. And to me, I always laughed at that rhetoric because you want your puzzles more obtuse. You want your challenges to be more difficult, and maybe that's fair. But I hear one side where they want things more difficult, more obtuse, more challenging in a traditional sense. But on the other hand, I hear people saying that it was too hard, that the motion controls didn't work the way they were intended. There was always two sides of each coin. Personally, I found that the controls were okay. I won't say that the controls were perfect. Skyward Sword's main gimmick was that they attempted to make the game around the idea of the player having sword in hand. That you could, with the motion control, twist your wrist in a way and change the direction that Link is holding his sword and how he swings it. But the problem was that if you swung the sword too hard, you would desync the movement on it, and you would have to resync it up to where it's supposed to be, which changed how the game functioned. Now, I found this absolutely hilarious because for me, it was very common for me to swing the sword 4 or 5 times, go into look mode, reset all of the systems so that my sword arm was recalibrated, and then I'd turn around and keep on swinging away as if nothing ever happened, having to do it another 12.5 times in the same play session because that's what worked for me. It was a very small change that made a lot of difference to me as an individual. To some, it would have been a nuisance, a frustration, something that would weigh the game down. But I was too invested in the world of Skyward Sword. Its main villain, Girahim, being the menace that he was both endearing and terrifying. I always remember reading his voice in this, oh, bravado, oh, look who it is. I remember plucking Her Majesty out of the sky, and you're here right now, not in pieces. And it was always very suave, very gentle until you'd start seeing the smaller text and he would get all knotted up and angry. I'd read it through gritted teeth. That loathsome servant of the goddess, she had once again... that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that goddess-serving dog escaped with the girl. And you could actually feel the emotion behind the character because of how animated he was. And that, to me, always stuck out as Girahim being one of the more enjoyable villains in Zelda. Because when you have a character like Ganondorf, who's power for the sake of power, I coveted that wind, I suppose. All across Hyrule, a wind blew that allowed for peace, prosperity. It brought life, it brought joy. But to my people, to the people of all of the Gerudo Valley, it only brought one thing: death. To me, that always stuck out. And the thing is that we have another character that always stuck out to me. This one being none other than King Zant of the Twilight people, the Usurper King. And honestly, I loved Zant. Zant was terrifying. He was composed, he was powerful, he was a question. The way he spoke, the way it was intended to be brought about was, oh yes, a quick question for you, princess. A question for you and all the people of Hyrule. Life or death? And it was very tactical, very calculated type of individual. And I love that about Zant, because it always made him feel more... He always felt like more than just a standard villain. He always felt like there was more to his character, that he was terrifying because of how he was portrayed. He wasn't somebody who was evil for the sake of evil. He was a conqueror. He was fighting for what he believed to be his right. He felt justified. And he did what he felt was necessary to showcase that. But he did so in a way that didn't feel like he was just lashing out at those around him. It felt like he was doing more. Like he was trying to free his people, because that's genuinely what it was. That's what he was after, was freeing the Twilight people from the Twilight Realm, allowing them in their half-darkness, that hour of twilight, to breathe a sigh of relief in a realm that could actually support more of their people. A realm that wasn't forcing the Twilight to starve, to fade away into nothingness. That, I think, is what made Zant so powerful as an individual. He never really pushed in the way that some might. He wasn't pushing to be more powerful for the sake of more power. He was pushing to get things done in a way that made sense to him for a grander goal, a greater ambition. And that's what I want to take away from these characters, was that there was always a grander scheme, a grander reason, more to it than just, I want to be powerful for the sake of being powerful. Anywho, the next one I want to talk about is one that I didn't actually get a hand on until probably about 2013. It was Zelda Minish Cap. Now, back in 2002, 2004-ish, if my memory serves accurate, I had seen ads for this game, this story of how Link got his hat. I remember thinking that it seemed silly. Why would Link need a story about how he got his hat? And I remembered how confused I was that this was even an option, and trying to figure out how it made sense within the canon of Zelda as I knew it. And I think one of the things that tied me into this particular one was how it portrayed Link. Now, there are some Zeldas that treat Link as very adult, very mature, very much a father or brotherly, more of a brotherly figure to most individuals. He's there on your or behind you, making sure that everything's okay. Because if he wasn't behind you, he was in front of you, and that was usually a bad thing. But this version of Link was childish. He was a young, goofy kid spending his days trying to play, trying to enjoy his younger years. He was pure of heart. Now, most Links get this rap of being a individual with an unbreakable spirit, that no matter what hardships befall them, Link will be fine. But this one specifically got the title because of purity, because of that childlike whimsy. And to me, that made sense. Link was never intended to be this all-encompassing, devastatingly powerful or ridiculous character. He was meant to be a character that was a link between you and the game. Just so happens that as games became more serious, so too did Link. But the Minish Cap took him in the direction of being that child, of being the kid for the sake of being a kid. And it turned out that only a child, only a kid, could see the Picori, or the Minish, believing that Link was the only one who could break Zelda out of the curse that was placed on her by Vaati. Link was sent out with a new sword, a shield that he had just been gifted by Zelda, and his head held high. Because how else is he going to fix the Picori sword? How else is he going to make this happen? Unless he stands up for what he believes is right. And lovely thing about Link is he does. He not only sets in to do everything he possibly can, but never once loses who he is as a character. In the second dungeon, he takes a minecart around it to travel from one room to the next. He goes flying through screaming like a banshee because he's terrified of this roller coaster he's on. And yet, as soon as he gets off, he's, shakes it off, he's perfectly fine, and meanwhile his companion character, Eslo, is, that was terrifying, never ride that thing again, who designed that, never again, nope. And, to me, that stands out as being a funny little moment that makes Eslo more relatable. It makes Link more relatable. The Temple of Droplets being focused around a central location where your goal is not to get the key right off the bat. You get the key to the boss room in the first 15 minutes. No, your goal is to melt off the boss itself and get the water element off of it. And these are just a couple notable circumstances that required out-of-the-box thinking and childlike whimsy to solve. Meanwhile, you have other links, like Twilight Princess, which had a series of puzzles about blowing up stalactites off the top of the roof of one of the buildings, because if you blew those up, you would fall down in front of him and create a pathway for him to run up a wall. It made sense in context, but it was that different style of looking at the problem in a more open-minded way that I think makes the younger one stand out. And to be fair, and I'm going to say this as an individual who loves Breath of the Wild, I think most of Breath of the Wild's puzzles struggle because they were designed with limited tools in mind. See, Breath of the Wild's tool system is based on what I would consider to be 4 base tools. Tool 1 is magnesis, tool 2 is bombs, 3 is stasis, and 4 is cryonis. This is all of his gadgets and gizmos. He is given a bow, he is given a shield, he is given 1 two-handed weapons, as well as spears. All of this makes sense in context, but when you are building your entire game around this very limited scope of abilities, Link ends up falling into it's not really difficult to solve this puzzle. It's more about situational awareness. But the problem is that most Zeldas prior to this were more about trying to find the path forward, not trying to understand the layout of the area. If I could compare most of the more recent, or if I could compare dungeons to the Divine Beast of Breath of the Wild, I always find that Breath of the Wild ends up with this situation where the Divine Beasts were really open-ended and easy to get through, which sounds really ridiculous because they were designed significantly later. They should have better puzzles in them. But most of the time, the puzzles were devoted to 1 or 2 of the tools in the kit, and the rest of it was just how far can you go with what you have. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the point was to make it easier so that any Divine Beast could be done in any order. That you, the player, didn't necessarily have to stress about, okay, am I going to Vah Ruta first or Redania first? Am I going to Meadow or to Naboris? Am I going north, south, east, or west? This is something that comes up all the time. Because every single region in all of Zelda Breath of the Wild has something specific to it that allows it to be more unique, more interesting, more all-consuming, or well thought out. And so each of the Divine Beasts were designed around the idea that you can go anywhere at any time, meaning that each dungeon is designed as if it was your first dungeon, more of a situational awareness dungeon, if you will. And this meant that as the Divine Beasts could move and tilt and create electrical signals from one section of the Divine Beast to the other, and really dive into all the little nooks and crannies and aspects of what made the Divine Beast so unique, they also ended up losing a lot of the potential difficulty. Because a lot of the difficulty in the puzzles falls in the face of the overworld challenges. And most of those are trying to figure out how to get A to B, or talk to said specific NPC and have certain things unlocked. It's not so much about can I solve the puzzle, and more so about what does this puzzle actually entail? What are we actually aiming for? And that's the beautiful thing, is there is plenty of information that ties into how Breath of the Wild was designed. Ocarina of Time was designed, and I'm going to get some flack for this, it was designed with linearity in mind. Your first 3 dungeons are the child dungeons. You go through the Deku Tree, the Dodongo's Cavern, Jabu Jabu's Belly. An experienced player can go through them in relatively any order, but theoretically you can go through them, or are supposed to, or aimed at doing them in A, B, C. Then you have the Forest Temple, the Fire Temple, Water, Shadow, and Spirit. 3 of these are perfectly fine. You need to beat the Shadow Temple, or the Water, Fire, and Forest Temple before you can unlock the Spirit or Shadow Temple, because you need the Lens of Truth from the Kakariko Well to be able to enter the dungeons and actually properly go through them. This is the intent or intended way through the game. But the thing is that theoretically, again, you can do this in virtually any order. I myself have done it where I do it as by the book as possible, and I've done others where I've gone through part of the forest, went to part of fire, went through part of water, went and did the child's portion of the Under the Well and the Spirit Temple, came back, did whatever I could elsewhere, and so on and so forth, just to see how far I could break the game. How much is actually intended to be done at certain points. How much could I do out of order? And that was a lot of fun, actually. It really recontextualized my understanding of what the Zelda games were intended to be. Because it was never about the specific tools. It wasn't about the gatekeeping situations. It was about the exploration. The idea that you could technically go wherever you want, and nobody can stop you. And I think that's a fantastic thing to mention, is you can go wherever you want. In later games, notably ones like Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, kind of the late GameCube, early Wii era, we ended up with the situation of we had Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword both come up. Both of these games were very, and I mean very, story-focused. It was very difficult to break the timeline of events in these games because the entire point of them was that there was a specific A to B mentality. Twilight Princess, you go from the forest, or you go from the Ordon village, you get turned into a wolf, you go through the Hyrule Castle, you go to the fort, or you pick up your stuff, clear the Twilight out of the forest, beat Forest Temple, Eldin, beat Fire, or clear all of the nasties out of the Twilight realm of Eldin, go back, get some more stuff, fight or finish the Fire Temple, go through Lanayru, complete the main quest of Lanayru's Twilight realm. Complete some side quests because you need something to get you down to the Water Temple. Find your way to the Water Temple. Bada bing, bada boom. Now you have more side quests. Now what? Where do we go next? It's very sequential. It is very much planned around this is the path that our players are expected to take. But Skyward Sword somehow does more of that. That there is something before and after each dungeon that makes traveling from one region to the next, to the next, to the next, much more difficult. Because every time you need to go to the Lanayru province from Faron, or Faron to Eldin, or so on and so forth, it's back and forth to the Sky Realm. You are looking for different ways around all of Hyrule, because there are no connected paths in Skyward Sword. And so, unironically, you end up with a situation where you always have to follow the same intended path through the game. I'm putting intended in quotations here because there are ways to break it, it's just really hard to break it. Which I think is interesting. you can also go several steps the other direction. Look at the original Zelda. Technically, is an A to B type mentality for most of the dungeons. But as long as you've taken the time to find all the things or dig deep enough, eventually you will find your way through. Do you have to beat any dungeons before you beat the first or before you take down the next enemy? No. But you do need to collect a certain number of things before you get to certain aspects of the game. An example being you have to beat each of the bosses before you get to Ganon. You have to defeat certain trials before you are able to get into level 9 Death Mountain. This is intention. This is the goal of the game. But where to with all of this? Why is all of this so important in my head? Well, it's because every game kind of treats it a little bit differently. Looking at some of the more linear ones and the more open-ended ones, there's bits and pieces that can be pulled from each. Majora's Mask is both one of the most linear and open-ended Zeldas you will ever play, because technically, you need certain events to happen in a chronology in order for the game to work in a specific way. Now, I've never tried it, but by my understanding of it, once you get the bow, you could theoretically turn around and go straight up the Snow Peak Mountains. Once you get the ability to get a horse, which you admittedly require powder kegs for most of the time, once you get your horse, you are able to get to the beach. Once you get to the beach and get all of your tools in line, you could theoretically go to Ikana Canyon. Now, I know that it's very linear in its execution, but everything in the game is done in a cyclical nature, so technically you could also sequence break most of Majora's Mask because it's kind of programmed on duct tape. And that's fun, to some degree. I think that's actually one of the more interesting aspects of the more open-ended Zeldas, that you can approach any problem with any somewhat planned-out solution. Which brings me, I suppose, to one of the games that I think does open-ended well. There are actually two games that really do it well. The first is, of course, A Link to the Past, and second, A Link Between Worlds. These two games generally have a open-ended nature. They have a prescribed level order. You should go through this area before this area kind of thing. But as long as you've beaten the first 2-3 dungeons, typically the Eastern Palace, the Tower of Hera, and the Desert Palace, if my memory of the games is accurate, which it might not be, you're clear to go wherever you want. Each of the remaining, if I recall, 7 dungeons, each has more information, more gameplay tied to them that make them more difficult or more unique to get to. You need certain tools to do it, but A Link Between Worlds allows you to buy all of your gear more or less outright. So nothing's stopping you from getting from one end of the world to the other, because why not? And being able to break the game in such a way always made replaying it that much more interesting. Because if you want to go to Turtle Rock right off the bat, again, there's nothing stopping you. So, who knows? Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, maybe you're making a mole out of a mountain hill. Who knows? What I can say for certain is that this is taking a lot longer than I was aiming for to get to Hateno. So I suppose now is as good a time as any to explain the goal. So I know outright at this moment in time that I need to access the camera a couple of side missions could be involved here in order to get the camera working for a couple of shrines. I know that. To get to said camera, I need to activate the blue flame for the Hateno Ancient Tech Lab. Now, my understanding of it is that if I can get a torch from their big blue flame, whatever it is, out in the pasture, to the Ancient Tech Lab, then I can get everything sorted out more or less all at once. That there's going to be absolutely no concern. I will be perfectly fine. Once I get that, I can collect some pictures of some various doohickeys and doodads, the giant guardians, take them to a side area and say, congratulations, we did it. And I have no problem doing that, to be very clear. But in order to do so without feeling like I'm cheating the system, I have to do so with the steel cart. The reason I want the steel cart is because I need something that is capable of handling handling what I'll call freight. A item or two that it can loosely magnetize to the front or back of the cart with that little shell at the end, so that I can get my object of choice, in this case a torch, from point A to point B without having to hold it. This is partially because I do not trust myself with weapon type machine or entities. Now, I mentioned that this was a weaponless challenge, and I argue that I am still aiming for that. But the difference between the weaponless, or between my iteration of weaponless and what I think a lot of people's are, is that I have no issue using a torch. It is classified as a weapon, but I'm not swinging it. I'm not using it for combat. The instant I swing it for anything at all, I've kind of given up the challenge. But I have a theory, actually two of them, as to how I can make this work. The first is that I might be able to light the torch with this heavy metal box or crate, because why not? There's an open grate on it, just put it close to fire and whoosh, blue flame. Assuming that the blue flame does not activate through that choice of direction, I may be able to activate it through holding it and jumping, not swinging it. Assuming that I can do it by just holding it and jumping means I'm not swinging it, I'm not using the weapon. At least not for its initial intended purpose, not as a weapon. So, I don't know. Maybe it's breaking the rules, maybe it's not. I'll leave that to you to decide. I personally believe that it is a bit of a gray area in the rules because I'm not swinging or using the weapon in the combative sense where my initial expectations were. But again, your call, your choice. Anywho, once we get access to the camera room, we will gain access to a couple other things. Notably, we'll get access to the true ending of the game, as well as a couple shrines that require pictures of guardians to activate. So, that being one of them being access as well to the Bomb Runes Plus. Now, Bomb Runes Plus is actually going to be a huge boon, because there are a couple shrines that I felt were difficult but not impossible. There was something just a little bit too far for me to actually reach what I was aiming for. And it made me question, maybe I could go just a little bit further and do just a little bit more. Get a little bit further. That was at least the hope, that I could do something more. Goodbye. You know, this thing is really powerful. I don't know why I haven't been using metal objects all that much. But once I get the Bomb Rune Plus, a lot of the shrines that I've been struggling with or have been unable to complete may actually be completable. I can't prove it yet, but that is the goal. So maybe I'll be able to complete more of Zelda than I initially expected. But all of this hinges on whether or not my plan actually works. Because if it works, great. If it doesn't, that's a lot of wasted time. Given it's already 45 minutes into this, I really don't want this to be a failure. Anywho, the other thing that I'm going to be dealing with in the near future is that the next region of Hyrule I'm going to be dealing with is the very southwest corner of Hyrule. The area overlooking the mountainous region beside the ocean. Laurelin Village, as well as a couple of, shall we say, side shrines, including, but not limited to, one of my favorites, Eventide Island. Now, this series of shrines and challenges all are more or less going to be kind of the same idealistically. They all kind of fall under, can I do it, can I not? How much do I need to put into this to make it happen? And I know that I need certain things to happen. I need to get a scale from Farosh, the lightning dragon, yet. And I think that's pretty well it. So, at this moment in time, I have, 6, 8 goals left? Every missing shrine that I can't access, I want to take a little bit of time and dig into and see what I can get involved with, or see what I can cook up and solve. And who knows, maybe some of my missing shrines are going to be completable now that I have, or once I have Bombs Plus. Because there's some, like the, oh geez, it's not magnesis based, it's stasis based shrines are really difficult because I can't use stasis for its intended purpose. And sure, absolutely, could I try to break the game in 17 different ways and see what kind of trouble I can get into? Absolutely. But I'm not very good at breaking the game, at breaking video games. Some people can do it in absolutely no time, no problems whatsoever, and other people, like myself, really struggle to actually make them happen. Because glitches, oversights, etc., unless I personally find it, I have no idea how to perform them. Wind bombs is one that I've heard a lot of people mention as being a catch-all solution. That as long as I can use wind bombs, virtually everything in Zelda Breath of the Wild is perfectly feasible. And I have yet to make it work once. And that is a shame, because I do want to actually make it happen. But I'm not going to throw myself at something for 17 hours straight to make it happen, especially given how many other things I'm doing on a regular basis. So, there is that as well. Anywho, we are just outside Hateno Village. So, we are looking at finally completing this massive run. And I'd say it was somewhat useful. I got a lot of food on the way, and can prove that I could theoretically get a minecart from one end of the world to the other, so that's nice. The only place I don't think I could get one is probably to the top of Mount Lanayru. But even then, or not Lanayru, Mount Hateno. Not Hateno. Hebra Mountains, there it is. That's the right words. Unfortunately, I don't think I can get a metal object at the top of the Hebra Mountains, but I'll be honest with my assessment that I think that that is the only way I'm going to be completing one of the shrines that I've been looking at for a while. The Hebra Mountain shrines end up being difficult. There's one leading directly to the skull, or the great skeleton hidden within the Hebra Mountains. That is one of the more difficult ones to get to. And I've been trying to figure out how to solve it, how to get to that region without causing, or without needing to use a metal object for the duration of the run. And I have yet to figure anything out. See, the solution is reasonably open-ended to me. The goal is I have to get from point A to point B. I have to climb the mountain with a metal object, and then use said metal object to guide a snowball to be as large as possible so that it hits the door at just the right way so as to open a giant door that can't be opened by anything other than an oversized snowball. That, to me, is one of the most difficult challenges I've run into so far. Because I know it's possible. But ever since I realized that there was the magnesis shenanigans, where if you, the player, Link, have a magnesis object and push it and your magnesis object against something else that can move, the game stops doing calculations on physics altogether, which is great. It means that you, the player, can use virtually anything to get virtually anywhere. But using anything to get anywhere has its consequences. So, I'll admit, I have never actually tested this theory out before. I was kind of going with the flow and trying to figure out what might work. So, forgive me, I'm testing something really quick here. So if I put a thingy thing in the front, like the barrel there, and go up the hill here, we should reach what I consider to be the torch or the original flame just under here. I like the original flame. It's nice. It's blue. I like blue. So I think this is the one that I'd go to. That doesn't bode well. Oh, there it is. Never mind. So we can, in fact, light something on fire using the blue flame. So now the question is, where's a torch in Hateno? We're going to find one here pretty quick, and I'll be right back when I do. Okay, so I found all sorts of tools, but the only torch I was able to find is inside the Hateno Tech Lab here. So, knowing that, we're just going to take the torch, run back out. Yes, I know it's on my back. Yes, I know I'm transporting it. I am not actively using it. Drop it in the metal tray like so. And why is this thing tipping so weird? Sorry. Apparently the barrel was a lot easier to balance than the torch. Good news is, I am nothing if not adaptable. Let's just shimmy this. Oh, there we go. It's in the... Yeah, it's in the bucket now. Perfect. So, we're just going to walk back down the hill towards the torch thing. And hopefully the torch stays put. It's going to be my biggest problem if anything goes wrong is, will I be able to keep the torch in the basket, so to speak? Oy, oy, oy. You know, for a massive task that this was, I'm actually really impressed as to how well it's worked. Because, honestly, I didn't know if this would be possible. See, I've seen a couple people do ridiculous things. One of them was an individual by the name of, or nickname of GameChamp 3000. And this individual did a run of Breath of the Wild without the use of the pause button, which is absolutely absurd. The pause button or lack thereof, meant that Game Champ couldn't do everything quite as well as they would like. And so, what gave me the idea to use the torch in this way was actually how Game Champ dealt with the 3 dragons, which was that they had to knock off a dragon's scale and then get it inside in this case, one of the minecarts, and then minecart it across the entire world to get to, or across the world from point A to point B, where they would drop off the end goal item. In this case, the scales. For me, using the torch is done in much the same way. But the problem is that Game Champ also used Rivali's Gale multiple times to be able to... Oh, that's not good. Why is the torch orange? Game Champ used Rivali's Gale to get items back in the basket. Because my ruling kind of is a little more loose, I figured that transporting it using alternative means would be in the spirit of the run, even if I can pick up and drop items where I so see fit. Okay, so I cannot light that torch with this. So we have to come up with another plan. And I think I might have one. It's just gonna be a little bit awkward for a couple moments here. So we know that if I try to light it in the basket, it don't do anything. So we're gonna go with option B. I hold the torch and jump. You saw I jumped. I did not swing the torch. We're fine. Now the torch is in the basket, I must get the torch from point A to point B. And that's what I was afeared of. I still can't light... Well, that didn't go as well as planned. Excuse me while I light myself on fire. Anywho. We're gonna get back in the minecart here. I'm having a really rough day, hoofty. Just give me a sec. There we go. Set you back in the basket. And we are just gonna gently glide this back up the mountain. And yeah, we can't light that torch, which is fine. Perfectly fine. It just means we gotta make it all the way to the top without dropping it, technically. So, yeah. Let me know down below if you think that this was absolutely absurd and probably a waste of time, or whether you think that my pseudo loophole is reasonable. I'd love to hear it because I'm always curious how people view my my guidelines that I have set. Sometimes I feel that I overdo it. Sometimes I feel like I am not pushing the boundaries enough. So maybe it's just me, but I'd love to hear what those around me, those who view this, actually think. Anywho, so we are heading up the top of Hateno. It's absolutely fantastic. We got our torch set. The entire run from the Goron City all the way to Hateno is complete. And this has been probably the most time I have ever devoted to what I would ordinarily consider a simple one-to-one task. I think ever. See, some games I devote more time than others to silly circumstances or doing in certain ways, but I don't think I've ever just devoted an hour and a half to something as simple as lighting a torch. Maybe just me, but I think that's a realm of absurdity that not many people have gone to. Anywho, we're at the top of the tower, and Pura here, as soon as we get in, is going to pass on our newest tools. And hooray for that. Because the blue torch worked. Never again. So, now the blue torch is lit, we are going to complete about 4 separate side objectives. The first is that we need Purah to prep the camera room, which is pretty easy. So once we go through our little conversation here, 3, 2, 1, and there we go. We now have the lovely camera rune downloading. Not sure how the camera rune can be downloaded onto such ancient technology, but it is not for me to state why I think that's a good or bad thing. It is up for me to say, something is weird about this. I don't like it. But it does give us access to a few different things. First and foremost, it gives us access to the memories system, which unlocks the true ending of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Congratulations, I ain't doing that. I don't see a point in completing the memory side quest, because while it does unlock the true ending, it doesn't change much at all. Secondly, because we have the opportunity, we're going to talk to Purah about 3 more times. The first is, yep, we have the camera, the compendium, the album, everything looks good. Purah hasn't seen her new young form since becoming a kidlet again, because despite the fact that she looks like a 4-year-old, she is in fact over 100. So there we go. The 100-year-old Purah is absolutely dumbfounded by her current stature. Anywho, with that, we now have one more thing. Now, initially, I was under the impression that I had to go to the Akala Ancient Tech Lab, which is on the other side of Hyrule with a torch, to do its special quest. Thankfully, if we bring Purah ancient materials, we can get her to upgrade the runes instead. So, we're going to do something cool. And we are going to give her a whole bunch of ancient shafts, I think it is? Yes. And with the ancient shafts, we will gain access to the Remote Bombs Plus. Which means, hooray, we can officially move on with a higher powered version of each tool. Or of our main tool. So, huzzah. Anywho, with everything said and done, if you liked the video, I would love if you left a like or a comment down below. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm, and I would love to see it. If you wouldn't mind leaving a subscribe as well, I would greatly appreciate it. But until next time, where we'll be dealing with a lot of the click-snap problems, that's it for now. And I hope you all have a fantastic one. Until next time, have a good one.